I see you're back again. I'm glad. Did you enjoy the last episode? It was intense, wasn't it? Well, I hope you're prepared because this episode is going to be even more so. We left off with Professor Emma Grant still a captive and detectives Earl Solano and Paul Derrick trying to figure out where she is and whether she would end up dead or not. There was also the issue with a leak in the Special Investigations team. Okay, let's continue. Earl stopped pacing. There was something he wasn't seeing. What was it? They take Emma thinking she'd hand over the cylinders, only to realize that she didn't have them. Why aren't they releasing her now that they have them? Paul, I think I got it. They're going to keep Emma until those cylinders make it out of the country. That's why Stillwell has the airport covered. He knows who it is. Paul, who was pacing too, sat down and stared at his partner. If Earl's theory was right, what's to keep them from killing her once those cylinders leave the country? In a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Mr. Sterling smiled as he examined the crystals through his lenses. They were unharmed. Silver in this form had a definite advantage of retaining potency. Once processed, it degrades fast. He planned to have his chemists work to eliminate those pesky side effects, and then the sky's the limit. Mr. Bolton, I am pleased with the merchandise, Mr. Sterling said in his German-accented English. Mr. Sterling was a very important and influential man who paid well. Walter Bolton also knew that as pleased as Mr. Sterling was, he could just as easily be displeased. The drugs had arrived late, and even though he had apologized, he knew that Mr. Sterling didn't forget. Walter wished he could have Rivera and Santiago shot again. They were the ones who started this whole mess. They had to get greedy and try to double-cross him. He couldn't let them get away with that now, could he? And then there was that stupid special investigations agent he had hanging on a string, but he had his ace in the hole. That teacher was sitting pretty in that trailer, and all he had to do is make one more contact. Mr. Bolton, I think we should have a chat now, the large man said as he wrapped the cylinders in a black velvet cloth and removed his gloves. He handed them to his ever-present bodyguard standing behind him. His bodyguard was dressed in a black suit and tie, wore dark glasses even indoors, and stood in an intimidating stance. Yes, sir, Bolton said. Mr. Sterling leaned over to his side and pulled up a small black case and placed it on the desk in front of them. He opened it facing Walter so he could see inside. $100,000, the final installment of his payment as promised. If he were to make it to his car, he'll be home free, Walter thought. Mr. Sterling closed the case with a sharp click and kept a protective hand on it. Walter, I have received some very disturbing news and I was hoping you could shed some light on it for me. 3 people are dead, and I hear that the authorities are breathing down your neck, which means my neck will soon be feeling it too. I don't like this at all. I'm confident that you will have everything under control soon. I have a plane to catch in 2 days, and I would be very disappointed if I were to miss my flight. Mr. Sterling, please rest assured you have nothing to worry about. I will take care of everything, and you will not miss your flight, Walter said in a tight voice. A few minutes later, Walter was standing in the elevator with his case of money at his side. He got in his car and drove away scared shitless. He drove straight to Queens. He wasn't very familiar with the area and drove around a bit before he found what he was looking for. The drive-thru at McDonald's was light, and he ordered a number 6 from the extra value meals. Afterwards, he drove further into Queens. Walter parked and sat back to eat. The thought of feeding the woman inside the beat-up trailer was only a mild afterthought. She was the key to his survival. With her, he could orchestrate the removal of the greedy SI agent and ensure that he got away free and clear. Walter Bolton was a professional courier, and he made the colossal mistake of hiring underlings to help move the drugs. He had only himself to blame for that. He had been using those 2 to keep the heat from him, but they got caught passing packages. They never knew they were transporting silver in its rock form. The packages contained other drugs too, but always silver in rock form. Silver was the new high, the wave of the future in designer drugs. He never suspected that the college was under surveillance. He agreed to hire Rivera and Santiago through acquaintances. They assured him that they weren't too ambitious, that they'd do what they were told. It was a complete surprise when Rivera contacted him to cut a deal. Walter smiled at that. The last package was exclusively silver, and that twit thought to double-cross him. The moron didn't even know what he had. He reckoned his biggest mistake was in trying to smooth the way to Mr. Sterling by using the agent. He'd approached the agent with the promise of only $5,000 to look the other way, and another five to feed him information. The information gave Walter a bird's-eye view of everything the other side was doing. The narcotics detectives were the only thorns in his side, but even they had to settle down and play ball. Solano was desperate to find his lady, and that was where his luck changed. With some very creative canary work, he'll be able to shrug the slug of an SI agent off him. Then he would do the honorable thing and release the teacher. He had a soft spot for teachers. His mother had been a teacher. It was after 10 p.m. when Walter stepped out of his car to approach the trailer. He walked all the way around it to make sure it was locked tight. He banged on the side. "Hello, Professor Grant. I want to apologize for keeping you for so long. Things didn't work out the way they were supposed to. I promise that very soon, your boyfriend will come for you. You won't be harmed as long as he cooperates. I'll be back tomorrow night to see to your needs after I speak with him," Walter said through a hole near the bottom of the door. "Wait, please don't leave me here. I'm cold and hungry, and there are mice in here with me," Emma croaked. "For that, I am truly sorry, but I promise tomorrow night you'll be warm and fed. I must leave you now. Just be brave a little longer." "No, please don't leave me here," Emma cried out, but she heard the car drive away. She screamed and cried, understanding that it was futile, but she was angry. What did that guy mean by he apologized? If he was so sorry, why did he leave her in the dark and cold? She calmed down after a while to realize that she was being used to keep Earl and Paul in line. As long as she was being kept, they would play along. For him and her family, she would try to hold it together. Emma knew that Matt was worried about her too, and he would not tell Sam any of this. And Lindora was probably going out of her mind. She missed them, and she missed Earl. She'd been fighting her feelings for him, but it was a battle she had lost and refused to acknowledge. In the back of her mind, she knew that if she gave in, she would have to accept that his work was dangerous. She didn't know if she could live with the knowledge that one day he wouldn't come home to her. She didn't know if she was strong enough for that. She also knew deep down that he was solid, and that he would find her. He would find her before the bad guys forced his hand to do something unethical. That was what that man implied, that Earl would do something for him. Emma wanted Earl to find her, but not at the expense of his integrity. She knew that he took his badge seriously. The law meant a lot to him, and she knew that it would hurt him if he had to compromise. Paul knocked on the door and waited for Earl to open up for him. He was worried about his partner, and he didn't want him to be alone. It had been a full day and 2 nights now since the kidnapping. Earl's stoic demeanor worried him, and he hadn't attributed to his British upbringing either. He came to work, but his heart wasn't in it. Paul was sure that he was at his breaking point. Earl opened the door, not surprised to find his partner on the other side. "Hey, mate, what are you doing here on your day off?" Paul entered. The apartment was spotless as usual. "Just stopped by to see if you'd heard anything." "No, I haven't, and I'd like to keep myself available when they contact me. I'm sure they know how to reach me, and I'm in the book. If they'd been keeping tabs on Emma, they know about us and where I live. I'm positive that's the way it will be. The Special Investigations Unit lost their chance to capture the smugglers and recover the drugs. But there is something else they need her for, or else Emma would have been released by now." Paul went into the kitchen and poured 2 mugs of coffee. They sat facing each other. They talked about how the case unfolded and discussed what they could have done differently. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Earl stood up quickly. Paul reached for his weapon. The building manager was on the other side of the door holding a white envelope. This was shoved under the door downstairs, and it had your name on it. "I know that you're a cop, so I didn't get curious and brought it right over. I was also instructed to tell you that if this brings trouble to the building, we are prepared to terminate your lease. No penalty," he said. He left just as abruptly. "Do you suppose that this is the contact you've been waiting for?" asked Paul. Earl tore the envelope open and pulled out a slip of paper. He read it and then handed it to his partner. The note was an anonymous tip about an SI agent currently on the case. The statement relayed how much money the agent received for allowing drug storage at the customs warehouse, and that he was also responsible for the explosion at the professor's apartment and the sleight of hand at the hotel. "What do we do with this information?" We've already figured it was true, but how do we use it to our advantage? Asked Paul. Earl nodded at his partner. This is the equivalent to the phone call I'd been waiting for. This tip isn't news to us, but it might be to Stillwell. I'm sort of disappointed that it isn't him. Who the hell is Dixon? Beats me. We weren't exactly friendly with those guys. So how do you want to play this? It's your show. I think we play this close to the chest, as you Americans say. We call Stillwell and meet with him and the chief only. Then together we come up with a plan to nail those bastards and get Emma back, Earl said with the first smile he'd worn in days. Agent Dixon sat in the back row of the movie theater on Main Street in Flushing, Queens. He pulled out his cell phone. The place was almost empty, and he looked around to make sure he wasn't being watched. This is Dixon, he said into the speaker. Stillwell is still running around in circles, and all his leads have dried up. It is just a matter of time before the case closes. I want another 5,000 to go on a little vacation when this is over. Agent Dixon, we have appreciated your cooperation. I hope that you understand. It distresses us that you feel you can milk the situation. I do not think my partners will feel kindly toward you when I tell them of your demands. Please hold while I confer with them. Agent Dixon heard a click, and then after 10 minutes, he heard another click. Agent Dixon, I have been instructed to tell you that if you insist on being paid extra, that you may end up dead like the others. Do you have a reply? The voice on the other end was distorted like all the communication had been on the case. Are you threatening me? He hissed into the receiver. If it weren't for me, you'd have been sitting in a jail cell twiddling your thumbs and guarding your asses. The unit has been on to you and your little operation from the very beginning. I have everything documented, and I can make you very sorry you crossed me. I know who you are. I'll keep in touch, Agent Dixon, and if I were you, I'd watch my back. Oh, and enjoy the movie. Dixon looked around wildly. His heart pounded hard in his chest. He got up and hurried out of the theater. He looked around carefully before he got into his car and drove away. Walter laughed as he drove away. Agent Dixon was scared now, and that was just the way he wanted him. The more frightened he was, the more mistakes he was likely to make. Pity, he thought. Solano didn't act on the lead he'd given him. No matter, he was safe. No one knew what he looked like. Emma swallowed hard and winced at the pain in her throat. She felt feverish. She didn't care anymore, and sat down, leaning against the cold metal of the trailer. A field mouse scampered over her boots, and she barely noticed. She felt so tired, and all she wanted to do was sleep. In the back of her mind, she knew the way she was feeling wasn't good, but she fell asleep anyway. Paul started to pull away to follow Dixon, but Earl stopped him and pointed. Another car pulled off too, but in the opposite direction. That's who we should be following. Dixon isn't going anywhere. That's our man, he said, pointing to the car driving away. I'll call the plate in and we'll see who we're dealing with, Paul said, pulling out his phone. No, if Dixon is dirty, there may be more. We'll check it ourselves. It was quiet at the station when the partners arrived and they headed straight for Delta. They'd known her for at least 3 years, and they knew she could be trusted. Hey, Delta, how's it going? Paul asked engagingly. Now, I wonder why the dynamic duo would deem it necessary to say hello to a lowly clerk like me. What do you gentlemen want? Delta was sharp. Can you run this plate for me? Earl asked, smiling just as engagingly as his partner. 15 minutes later, she pulled a sheet out of her printer. It's a rental from the airport if the address is correct, she said, handing them the sheet. Thanks, Delta. We truly appreciate it, Paul said. They walked away and headed toward the chief's office. Paul knocked and they walked in. Stillwell was there and nodded to them. The partners sat in the vacant chairs across from him and looked to the chief. Well, what have you got? He asked. We followed Dixon to a theater in Flushing. He was alone. He came out 20 minutes later looking paranoid and drove off. We were about to follow, but another car started off in the opposite direction. We caught the plates and ran them. They belonged to a rental in Dixon's name, Earl relayed. So it's true, Stillwell said through wooden lips. Gentlemen, we can agree that Dixon is dirty and that he had a hand in the explosion at the professor's apartment, the sleight of hand at the hotel, and passing information. There is a pattern here. The people we're dealing with are systematically shedding excess baggage. What we don't know is what category the professor is in. Agent Stillwell, from now on, we will be working together. I understand that your primary objective is Sterling, but our job is to find the professor. Who's Sterling? Asked Earl, suddenly very interested. Mr. Sterling is part of a very new drug cartel operating out of Europe. Our job is to assist in the capture of Sterling and the safe return of Mrs. Grant. The media has caught wind of this investigation. I'm prepared to give them a statement, Agent Stillwell said. He stood up and adjusted his suit jacket. Earl and Paul hung back while Stillwell and the chief stood in front of a podium already set up for the press. It was 2 in the afternoon and the car rental company was just starting to get busy. A Mr. Brown was behind the counter when the partners entered the office. I'll be with you in a minute, Mr. Brown said and returned to his conversation on the telephone. The car rental company had a dinky little office across from Kennedy Airport. The windows were dirty and the air smelled like stale smoke. What can I do for you folks? He asked. 2 badges landed on the counter along with Delta's printout. Oh, what can I do for you officers? Mr. Brown asked, straightening his tie. We'd like to speak with the person who processed this rental. Earl pointed to the printout. Was it in an accident? Asked Brown. No, it wasn't. We'd like to speak with whoever processed the rental, repeated Earl. That would be me. Mr. Brown flashed them a bright smile. The car was a GM Buick, dark blue license plate. Never mind the plate, we just gave them to you. We need to know who rented the car and maybe a description of what he looked like. Paul interrupted him. Oh, that's easy, Mr. Brown said. It was rented to a Neil Dixon. He was white with brown hair and eyes. He was very businesslike, like you two. Is he a cop too? When is the car due back? Paul asked, ignoring his question. Mr. Dixon called earlier for an extension. The car was due back today. You can do that over the phone? Yes, and he came by to put more money on the vehicle. You missed him by an hour, he continued. Did he use a credit card or paid cash? Mr. Brown punched a few keys on his computer. He paid by card and the car is due back this Saturday. Every time they thought they were ahead, the partners found they were lagging behind. This guy was either very smart or extremely lucky. The rental was a good lead, and he was confident they'd catch a break soon and find Emma. Earl decided to call it a day and logged out. He was tired and worried. He'd promised Ms. Dade and Matt that he would keep them updated. It wasn't something he was looking forward to, but it had to be done. Emma's family was genuinely worried about her, and it was important that they knew what was happening. It would give them some comfort to know that Emma is alive. He drove to Matt's house. Matt opened the door and ushered Earl in. Sam's at my parents'. You can speak freely. Ms. Dade was sitting on the couch. She looked hopefully at him. Earl had hoped to have the news relayed to her later, but now he had to face her. Ms. Dade, I'm glad to see you, he said. Detective, we would like to know what is going on and what you can tell us. There was a picture of Emma on the news today, and there was talk of murdered victims. I know what we saw on television is not to be taken at face value, so tell us what's really going on. Earl took a deep breath. There is every indication that Emma is alive and will be returned to us soon. As far as I know, she is being held for insurance purposes. For a while, I had lost hope, but we've gotten new information and we've already set things in motion. How can you be sure? You have to take my word for it. She will be released soon, Earl said. We're counting on you, Detective, Matt said at the door. Well, that wasn't as bad as he thought it would be. A little hairy, but not too bad. He drove home and flopped onto the couch. He couldn't bring himself to go into the bedroom. It was where he had first kissed her, where they had first made love just hours before she was taken from him. It only happened once, but he'd fallen deeply in love with her. Emma moaned as Walter gently picked her up and placed her in the back seat of his car. She was awfully warm to the touch and her breathing was labored. Great, he thought. She was sick, but it might work to his advantage. In her state, she wouldn't fight him and he wouldn't be forced to harm her. Besides, it wasn't as if she could identify him. No one can. Even Mr. Sterling didn't know what he looked like. He drove into the underground garage in the posh building in Manhattan overlooking Central Park and parked in the visitor's space. He made sure that no one was in the elevator before he got in. He pushed the button for the penthouse on the 21st floor. There he made it. He'd gotten the professor out of the trailer and into his house without a hitch. He placed her on the couch and wrinkled his nose. He needed to get her something warm to drink, and then she needed a wash. A woman should never smell bad, he thought. Emma moaned and tried to open her eyes, but the effort was too great. Her body was enveloped in a warm cocoon, and she relaxed her aching body into it. From far away, she could hear someone telling her to drink. She automatically opened her mouth and felt the hot liquid flow into it. She swallowed and grimaced at the pain in her throat. She tried to move her head away from the cup, but someone held it in place. She swallowed despite the pain, and when she had drunk it all, her head was released. Walter thought that he was clever in giving her the medicated drink. It would serve two purposes, one to warm her up, and two, help her on the mend. After making sure she was sleeping soundly, Walter went into his den and sat at his desk. From all that he'd learned of the SI case, Solano had used his tip, and Dixon was no longer on the case. In all the 10 years of his career, he'd never had any trouble. Lesson learned, he thought. If one wanted something done and done well, one had to do it oneself. He picked up the phone and dialed the detective's number. "Solano," Earl said groggily. "Ah, detective, I'm sorry if I woken you up. Shall I call back later?" "No, I'm awake." Earl sat up quickly. "Good. Wait by the telephone tomorrow for instructions to get your lady love." Walter hung up. Earl felt such relief he began to laugh. He laughed until his ribs hurt, and then he cried. Then he called Paul. "Okay, mate, tell me about the call. Anything unusual?" asked Paul. Same distorted voice and no background sounds. The bastard sounded confident and cocky, but he did assure me that my lady love would be mine once more. He didn't stay on too long like he was afraid I might trace him. Now, partner, do we let the chief in on this, or do we keep it to ourselves? I was thinking that she might not be in the best of shapes when we find her, and as this case had gotten so public, I don't think she'd appreciate cameras documenting something she would want private. Once we have her, we'll take her to the hospital and then call her family. The media can't get to her there. We can issue statements later. It's your call, mate. The next thing on our list is, do we consider the case closed once we have Emma back, or do we continue plodding along to bag our perp? Personally, I would like to have him alone for just 5 minutes, Paul said. He was happy for his friend and partner, but he was also a cop, and his job was to uphold the law. This guy had broken the law, and he was just the guy to see that said lawbreaker paid for it. Mate, you would have to stand behind me, and if there was anything left of him when I'm through, then you can have your 5 minutes. You bet we're going after him. Well, that's it for now. I'm sorry if you thought the professor was going to be rescued this time around, but come back soon to find out where she is found and what happens when the woman you love is hurt and you just have to hunt down the one who hurt her. Please like and share and subscribe.